When my daughter told me I wasn't welcome at her Christmas dinner, I just smiled, got in my car, and drove home. What happened next would teach her the most expensive lesson of her life. By the time Christmas morning arrived, my ungrateful family had made 99 desperate phone calls begging for my forgiveness. But I wasn't answering. Justice was finally being served, and the price of their arrogance was higher than they ever imagined. Before we continue, please subscribe to His Sweet Revenge and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. This is the story of how I made my own family panic with nothing more than silence. The whole mess started on December 15, 2023, when I made the mistake of assuming I was still welcome in my own daughter's life. Stupid me, right? I'd driven over to Whitley's house in my trusty old Honda Civic, the one she was always embarrassed to be seen in, carrying a bag of Christmas presents I'd spent 3 months saving up for. The house looked like something out of a magazine spread, 2-story colonial with perfectly manicured hedges and one of those fancy Range Rovers sitting in the circular driveway like it owned the place. I should have known something was wrong the moment I walked through that front door. Usually, my granddaughter Paisley would come running, arms wide, ready to tell me about whatever drama was happening in 2nd grade. This time, the house felt different, cold, like walking into a funeral home where everyone's pretending to be sad but secretly counting inheritance money. Whitley was standing in her designer kitchen, the kind with marble countertops that cost more than most people's cars, arranging flowers in a vase that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She looked up when I entered, and I swear I saw something flicker across her face. Annoyance, maybe, or calculation. "Dad," she said, not moving from behind her fortress of expensive granite. "We need to talk." Those 4 words. In my 67 years on this planet, I've learned that when someone says, "we need to talk," especially your own child, you're about to get hit with news that'll knock you sideways. I set down the bag of presents on her spotless floor, noting how she immediately glanced at it like I'd just tracked mud through her pristine palace. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" I asked, though my gut was already telling me I didn't want to know. She took a deep breath, the kind people take before they jump off a cliff or tell someone they're getting divorced. "About Christmas dinner this year. Things are going to be different." Different. Such a harmless word, right? Like saying a tornado is just different weather. Different how? I kept my voice level, but my hands were already getting that cold feeling they got whenever bad news was coming. "Well, Braxton's parents are flying in from Connecticut." She said this like it explained everything, like the arrival of her husband's family was some kind of natural disaster that required emergency protocols. The Ashfords are very particular about their holiday traditions. The Ashfords. I'd met them exactly twice in the 8 years Whitley had been married to their son. Both times, they'd looked at me like I was something they'd scrape off their designer shoes. Braxton Ashford III came from old money, the kind of family that had street names and hospital wings named after them. I came from the kind of family where we named streets after whatever dead president was popular that year. "Okay," I said slowly, "so we'll have a bigger dinner. I'll bring extra pies." The look she gave me then, I'll never forget it, like I just suggested we sacrifice a goat in her living room. "Dad, that's not going to work." The Ashfords have very specific expectations about Christmas. They're used to a certain level of sophistication. Sophistication. The word hung in the air between us like a slap I hadn't seen coming. "What exactly are you trying to tell me, Whitley?" She couldn't meet my eyes. Started fidgeting with her wedding ring instead, the diamond catching the light from her chandelier. The chandelier I'd helped pay for when they were temporarily short on their house payment 2 years ago. "Maybe it would be better if you celebrated Christmas somewhere else this year. You could visit Aunt Marlowe, or we could do something the weekend after." The weekend after Christmas. Like the birth of Jesus was just another appointment that could be rescheduled for everyone's convenience. I looked around that kitchen, at the copper pots hanging from hooks I'd installed myself, at the breakfast nook where I'd read bedtime stories to Paisley when she was tiny, at the family photos on the refrigerator where my face seemed to get smaller and more distant in each newer picture. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice coming out calmer than I felt. "You're uninviting me from Christmas because your husband's parents might be uncomfortable around me." "It's not that simple, Dad." Actually, it sounds pretty simple. I picked up my bag of presents, noting how they suddenly felt heavier in my hands. Your real family isn't sophisticated enough for your fake family. That's not fair. Fair. She wanted to talk about fair. I'd worked double shifts at the lumber yard for 30 years to put her through college. I'd walked her down the aisle at a wedding that cost more than my annual salary. I'd babysat Paisley every weekend for 2 years when childcare was too expensive for their budget. But fair was me spending Christmas alone, so the Connecticut Ashfords wouldn't have to make conversation with someone who pronounced words wrong and didn't know which fork to use for the salad course. You're right, I said, heading toward the door. It's not fair. But it's your choice. Dad, wait. But I was already walking away, past the family room with its leather furniture and 75-inch TV, past the staircase with family photos that told the story of how I'd become less important with each passing year. The front door felt solid under my hand, real in a way that nothing else in that house did anymore. Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be. I turned back one last time, seeing my daughter standing in the doorway of her perfect house with her perfect life, looking almost exactly like her mother had at that age. Except her mother, God rest her soul, had never been ashamed of where she came from. Tell the Ashfords I said Merry Christmas, I said, and tell them thanks for the lesson in sophistication. The December air hit my face like a wake-up call as I walked to my car. Behind me, I heard the door close with a soft click that sounded like the end of something important. I sat in my Honda for a moment, engine off, watching Christmas lights twinkle in windows of houses where families were probably planning gatherings that didn't require excluding anyone for the sake of appearances. My phone buzzed with a text, probably Whitley, wanting to smooth things over with empty apologies and vague promises about doing something soon. I didn't look at it. Instead, I started the engine and drove home, leaving behind the warm glow of the house where I was no longer welcome. The drive back to my place took 23 minutes through Stockton's evening traffic. 23 minutes to process the fact that my own daughter had just chosen her in-laws' comfort over her father's presence at Christmas. 23 minutes to realize that somewhere along the way, I'd become the embarrassing relative that families hide from their fancy friends. My house sat on Elm Street in the older part of town, where the trees were tall and the houses were small and nobody worried about impressing anyone. It wasn't much: 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that hadn't been updated since 1987. But it was mine. Paid off after 30 years of steady payments, worth exactly what I'd paid for it, which was fine by me. I walked through my front door and immediately felt the difference. No marble countertops or designer anything, just comfortable furniture and family photos that actually included me. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, modest but cheerful, decorated with ornaments Paisley and I had made together over the years. Paper angels and popsicle stick snowflakes that wouldn't win any design awards but meant more to me than all of Whitley's expensive decorations combined. I made myself a sandwich and sat down at my kitchen table, the one I'd built with my own hands when Whitley was in high school. The missed call notification was still there on my phone, taunting me. One message from my daughter, probably explaining why excluding me was actually for my own good. I didn't listen to it. Instead, I called my sister Marlo, who lived about an hour north in Sacramento with her husband Pike and their 2 kids. "Hey, stranger," she answered on the second ring. "Please tell me you're calling to accept my invitation for Christmas dinner." Marlo had been trying to get me to drive up for years, but I'd always spent the holiday with Whitley's family. Family loyalty, I'd called it. Stupidity, it turned out. "Actually," I said, "I think I might take you up on that offer this year." "Really? What changed your mind?" I looked around my kitchen, at the Christmas cards from neighbors and coworkers stuck to my refrigerator, at the calendar where December 25th was circled in red ink with Whitley's 2 p.m. written in my careful handwriting. Let's just say my social calendar opened up unexpectedly. Marlo knew better than to push when I used that tone. "Well, Pike's making his famous prime rib, and the kids are dying to show you their Christmas play. Xander's playing a wise man and Indy's the Star of Bethlehem." Sounds perfect. We talked for another 20 minutes about normal family things. How Pike's contracting business was doing, whether the kids needed new winter coats, what time I should arrive on Christmas Day. Normal conversations between people who actually wanted to spend time together. After I hung up, I sat in my quiet house and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Relief. For the first time in decades, I wouldn't have to spend Christmas walking on eggshells, worried about saying the wrong thing or using the wrong fork or somehow embarrassing my daughter in front of people who thought they were better than me. I erased Whitley's 2 p.m. from my calendar and wrote Marlowe's 0 p.m. instead. Then I went to bed earlier than I had in months, sleeping better than I had since my wife Delilah passed away 3 years ago. The next morning, December 16th, I woke up at 6:47 a.m. to the sound of my phone ringing. The caller ID showed Whitley's number. I let it go to voicemail and made coffee instead, the good stuff I usually saved for special occasions. Today felt special enough. The phone rang again at 7:15 a.m., again at 7:32 a.m. By 8 a.m., I had 6 missed calls and 4 voicemails I hadn't listened to. I was starting to enjoy the peace and quiet when someone started pounding on my front door. I looked through the peephole and saw Braxton standing on my porch, still wearing his expensive pajamas under a designer coat that probably cost more than my monthly pension. His face was red with cold and something that looked like panic. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Morning, Braxton. Little early for visiting, isn't it? Mr. Carson, we need to talk." He was breathing hard, like he'd been running. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said calmly. "Your wife made it pretty clear I'm not welcome at Christmas dinner. Message received." That's not what she meant. She was just worried about the seating arrangements, about making sure everyone was comfortable. Comfortable. I tasted the word like it was something bitter. "You mean comfortable without me there?" "Look, I know how this must seem, but the Ashfords are very traditional people. They have certain expectations. And I don't meet those expectations." He squirmed, probably realizing how his words sounded when said out loud. "It's not about you personally. It's about family dynamics." "Braxton," I said, not moving from my doorway, "let me ask you something. In 8 years of marriage to my daughter, how many times have your parents invited me to anything? Birthday parties? Anniversaries? Holiday gatherings? Anything at all?" He couldn't answer because we both knew the number was 0. How many times have they asked about my health, my interests, or even remembered my name correctly? Still nothing. "Your parents have made it clear from day one that I'm not their kind of people. And that's fine. I'm not looking for their approval. But I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not just so they can feel better about their daughter-in-law's unfortunate family connections. Mr. Carson, please. Whitley is devastated. She's been crying all night." Then she should have thought about that before she chose her in-laws' comfort over her father's feelings. I started to close the door, but Braxton stuck his foot in the frame. "Bad move. You can't just abandon your family over a simple miscommunication." "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said, my voice getting harder. "I'm just finally accepting the truth about where I stand in the pecking order. Now move your foot before I move it for you." He pulled back like he'd been shocked, probably not used to anyone talking to him that way. "Rich boy problems. This isn't over," he said, backing away from my door. "Yes, it is." I closed the door and turned the deadbolt with a satisfying click. Through the window, I watched him stumble back to his Range Rover, phone already pressed to his ear, probably calling Whitley to report that the old man wasn't cooperating with their damage control efforts. The phone calls started again around 9 a.m. First Whitley, then Braxton, then numbers I didn't recognize. Probably the famous Ashfords themselves, trying to manage the situation before it affected their precious holiday plans. I turned off the ringer and went about my day. I drove to Home Depot and bought supplies to fix my leaky faucet, something I'd been putting off for months. Funny how problems seemed more manageable when you weren't spending all your emotional energy trying to please people who didn't appreciate you anyway. At the hardware store, I ran into Bob Hernandez, who'd worked alongside me at the lumber yard for 15 years before we both retired. We got to talking about Christmas plans, and I mentioned I was driving up to Sacramento to spend the holiday with my sister's family. Good for you, Bob said, loading pipe fittings into his cart. Family's important, but respect is more important. My grandson learned that lesson the hard way last year. Bob's grandson had gotten too big for his britches after landing some fancy job in Los Angeles. Started treating his grandfather like an embarrassing relic from the past. Bob handled it by cutting off the financial support he'd been providing for the kids' expensive lifestyle. Amazing how quickly respect returned when the money stopped flowing. Sometimes people need to learn what they're losing before they appreciate what they had, Bob said. I thought about that conversation all afternoon while I fixed my faucet. The work felt good, satisfying in a way that family obligations never had. When you fix a leak, it stays fixed. When you try to fix family relationships by constantly giving in, you just teach people that your feelings don't matter. By evening, my phone showed 23 missed calls. I scrolled through the numbers, seeing Whitley's name repeated over and over, interspersed with Braxton's and a few I didn't recognize. The voicemail icon showed 15 unheard messages. I didn't listen to any of them. Instead, I called Marlo back and asked what I could bring to Christmas dinner. We decided on my famous apple pie and some of those dinner rolls Delilah used to make from her grandmother's recipe. Normal family planning between people who actually wanted to share a meal together. You sound different, Marlo said as we were wrapping up the call. Different how? Lighter. Like you've been carrying something heavy and finally put it down. She wasn't wrong. For years, I'd been carrying the weight of trying to be good enough for people who'd already decided I wasn't. The relief of setting that burden down was better than any Christmas present I could have asked for. December 17th started with my doorbell ringing at 7:30 a.m. I looked out to see a florist's delivery truck parked in my driveway and a young woman holding an enormous bouquet of flowers. Expensive ones. Roses and lilies and other fancy blooms that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. The card read, "Dad, I'm so sorry. Please call me. Love, Whitley." I gave the flowers to Mrs. Henderson next door, who was recovering from hip surgery and could use some cheering up. She was delighted with them, especially after I told her they were from my daughter who was sorry for being thoughtless. Mrs. Henderson had raised 4 kids of her own and understood family dynamics better than most. "Good flowers," she said, arranging them in a vase on her kitchen table. "Bad timing. When someone hurts you and then tries to buy forgiveness with expensive gifts, it means they know they were wrong but they're hoping you'll be cheap enough to forget about it." Mrs. Henderson had a way of cutting through nonsense that I appreciated. The next delivery arrived around noon. This time it was a fruit basket from some gourmet place, the kind with pears wrapped in tissue paper and chocolates that cost more per ounce than gold. The delivery driver had to make 2 trips to get everything from his truck. I kept the apples and oranges, waste not, want not, and gave the fancy stuff to the Thompson family down the street. Jim Thompson had been laid off from his job at the auto plant, and his wife Sharon was working double shifts at the diner trying to keep up with their mortgage payments. Their 3 kids were thrilled with the gourmet chocolates, and Sharon nearly cried when I told her there was more where that came from. "Your daughter must really love you to send all this," Sharon said, helping her youngest unwrap a chocolate shaped like Santa Claus. "She loves the idea of me," I corrected. "There's a difference." The third delivery was a case of wine from some vineyard I'd never heard of, bottles with labels in French and price tags that made my eyes water. I don't drink much wine. Beer was more my speed. So I took the whole case to Father Martinez at St. Catherine's, where I'd been attending Mass since Delilah died. "For the Christmas fundraiser," I told him. "Someone's trying to buy their way out of trouble, and the church might as well benefit." Father Martinez was a practical man who'd seen every kind of family drama during his 30 years of ministry. He accepted the wine without asking too many questions, but I could see him adding my situation to his mental list of parishioners who might need extra prayers. By the end of December 17th, my phone showed 42 missed calls. I'd received enough flowers to stock a funeral home, enough gourmet food to feed a small army, and enough wine to get the entire parish drunk. My neighbors were starting to look at me like I was some kind of celebrity, surrounded by delivery trucks and mysterious gifts. The gifts kept coming on December 18th. A cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my heating bill. A gift certificate to some fancy restaurant downtown. a set of golf clubs, even though I'd never played golf in my life and had no intention of starting. Each G. But not once did any of the cards acknowledge what Whitley was actually sorry for. Not once did they mention respect, or family loyalty, or the fact that she'd chosen strangers' comfort over her own father's feelings. I started keeping a list of everything that arrived, along with its estimated value. By the evening of December 18th, I calculated that my daughter had spent over $2,000 trying to buy forgiveness for something that would have cost her nothing to fix properly. A simple acknowledgement that she'd been wrong and a genuine invitation back to Christmas dinner. My phone now showed 58 missed calls, a number that was climbing faster each day as their panic grew. But that invitation never came. Just more expensive Band-Aids for a wound that needed actual medicine. December 19th brought the biggest surprise yet. I was drinking my morning coffee and reading the newspaper when I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Through the window, I saw a black Mercedes sedan with Connecticut license plates, and two people who could only be the famous Ashfords themselves. Garrison Ashford III was exactly what I'd expected: tall, silver-haired, wearing a coat that probably cost more than most people's cars. His wife Penelope looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine for wealthy women, all smooth blonde hair and subtle jewelry that screamed money. They approached my front door with the kind of careful precision people use when they're not sure if they're about to step in something unpleasant. I watched them through my peephole for a moment, enjoying their obvious discomfort at being in my modest neighborhood. The doorbell rang once, politely. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. "Mr. and Mrs. Ashford, this is unexpected." "Mr. Carson," Garrison said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from never having to worry about money. "We need to discuss this situation with our families." "What situation is that?" Penelope stepped forward, her smile as artificial as her hair color. "This unfortunate misunderstanding about Christmas dinner. Surely we can work something out that makes everyone comfortable." "I'm already comfortable," I said. "I'm spending Christmas with family members who actually want me there." Garrison's jaw tightened. "Mr. Carson, I understand you're upset, but you're putting our children in an impossible position." Whitley is beside herself with worry. Whitley made her choice. She chose your comfort over my feelings. Now she's dealing with the consequences. "But surely you understand our position," Penelope said, her tone suggesting she was being incredibly reasonable. "Christmas is such an important tradition in our family. We have certain ways of doing things, certain expectations about how the holiday should unfold. And I don't fit those expectations." She had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "It's not that you don't fit. It's just that we prefer intimate family gatherings. Close family only. I am close family. I'm Whitley's father and Paisley's grandfather." "Yes, but you're not really our family, are you?" Garrison said, his patience apparently wearing thin. "You're Whitley's family from before she married into our family." There it was, the truth they'd been dancing around for 8 years. In their minds, marriage didn't join families, it replaced them. Whitley had become an Ashford, which meant her previous family connections were now inconvenient relics to be managed or, preferably, ignored. "I see," I said. "So when Whitley married your son, I stopped being her father?" "Of course not," Penelope said quickly. "You'll always be her father. But family dynamics change when people marry, especially when they marry into established families with long traditions." "What exactly are you proposing?" Garrison straightened, probably thinking he was about to close a business deal. "We're prepared to make this worth your while. A nice vacation over the holidays, maybe, somewhere warm. We'd be happy to cover the expenses, of course. You want to pay me to stay away from my daughter's Christmas dinner. We want to make sure everyone has a pleasant holiday season," Penelope corrected. "Sometimes that requires creative solutions." I looked at these two people standing on my porch, offering to bribe me into disappearing from their perfect Christmas tableau. They honestly couldn't understand why I wouldn't just take their money and vanish gracefully, like the hired help accepting a generous tip. "I appreciate the offer," I said finally, "but I already have plans for Christmas." "Mr. Carson," Garrison said, his voice taking on a harder edge, I don't think you understand the delicate nature of family relationships. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the greater good. You're absolutely right, I agreed. Sometimes we do have to make sacrifices. The question is who's doing the sacrificing and who's doing the benefiting. I started to close the door, but Penelope put her manicured hand against the frame. Mr. Carson, please. Think about Paisley. She needs stability in her life, not family drama and conflict. Surely you don't want to put your granddaughter in the middle of this situation. That stopped me cold. Using my granddaughter as leverage was a new low even for them. Mrs. Ashford, I said, my voice dropping to something I barely recognized. Let me make something crystal clear. The only person putting Paisley in the middle of anything is your daughter-in-law, who decided her father wasn't good enough to share Christmas dinner with her child. I've never said one negative word about your family to that little girl, and I never will. But I'm also not going to pretend that being treated like a shameful secret is somehow good for her. But if you would just... Ma'am, this conversation is over. Enjoy your Christmas dinner. I'm sure it'll be everything you wanted: elegant, sophisticated, and completely free of anyone who might remind you that your son married beneath his station. I closed the door firmly and watched through the window as they stood on my porch for another minute, probably trying to process the fact that their money and influence hadn't solved their problem. Finally, they walked back to their Mercedes and drove away, leaving my neighborhood to return to its normal, non-Mercedes existence. December 20th was quieter. Only 8 new missed calls, bringing the total to 73, and just 2 deliveries, a gift certificate to the men's clothing store where I'd never shopped, and a bottle of cologne that probably cost more than my electric bill. I was starting to think Whitley's guilt budget was running low. I spent the day baking pies for Christmas dinner at Marlowe's, using Delilah's old recipes that I'd finally gotten the courage to try. The apple pie turned out better than I'd expected, and the pecan pie looked like something you'd see in a magazine. My kitchen smelled like cinnamon and nutmeg and all the warm scents that made Christmas feel like home. Mrs. Henderson came over around 4 p.m., drawn by the smell of baking. "Smells like heaven in here," she said, accepting a cup of coffee and a slice of apple pie that hadn't quite made it into the display-worthy category. "Just practicing for Christmas dinner," I told her. "Where are you spending the holiday?" "My sister's place in Sacramento. Her family actually wants me there." Mrs. Henderson nodded approvingly. "That's the difference between family and relatives. Family wants you around. Relatives tolerate you around. Is that from personal experience?" "Honey, I've got relatives I haven't spoken to in 15 years because they decided I wasn't fancy enough for their social circle. Some people get a little money or education and forget where they came from. The good news is, you don't have to pretend to be something you're not just to make them comfortable." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, 2 old people who'd learned that dignity was more important than keeping the peace at any cost. December 21st marked exactly 1 week since I'd been officially uninvited from Christmas dinner. My phone showed 87 missed calls now, a number that struck me as both impressive and pathetic. 87 attempts to reach me, but not one attempt to actually address the real problem. The day's delivery was the most telling yet. A check for $5,000 with a note that read, "Dad, I know money can't fix everything, but maybe you could use this for something special. Please call me. Love, Whitley." $5,000. More money than I'd seen in one place since Delilah's life insurance policy. Money that could fix my roof, update my kitchen, maybe even buy a newer car. All I had to do was cash it and pretend that everything was fine, that being bought off was the same thing as being respected. I endorsed the check and walked it straight down to St. Catherine's, where Father Martinez was overseeing preparations for the Christmas Eve service. "For the building fund," I told him, handing over the check. His eyebrows went up when he saw the amount. "This is very generous, but are you sure? This could make a real difference in your own life." "It's making a real difference right now," I said, "just not in the way it was intended." Father Martinez was wise enough not to ask too many questions about money that came with complicated family strings attached. The church could use it for something genuinely good, something that didn't require me to compromise my self-respect. That evening, Marlo called to finalize Christmas plans. Pike's making his prime rib, the kids are practicing their Christmas play, and I've got your room all ready, she said. Are you sure you don't want to bring anything else? Just myself, I said. That seems to be enough for some people and too much for others. Their loss, Marlo said simply. We're lucky to have you. Lucky to have me. When was the last time anyone in Whitley's circle had expressed that sentiment? December 22nd was a Saturday, and I woke up to the sound of persistent knocking on my front door. My phone showed 94 missed calls now. We were getting close to that magic number I'd been watching climb all week. Not the polite doorbell ringing of the Ashfords or the aggressive pounding of Braxton's panic, but the steady, patient knock of someone who was prepared to wait as long as necessary. I looked through the peephole and saw Paisley standing on my porch, her 8-year-old face serious with concentration. She was alone, which immediately set off alarm bells in my head. I opened the door quickly. Paisley, sweetheart, what are you doing here? Where's your mom? She's in the car, Paisley said, pointing to Whitley's BMW parked at the curb. She said she was too scared to come to the door, so she sent me. Using an 8-year-old as a messenger. That was a new low even for Whitley. Come in, One. It's cold out there. Paisley stepped into my living room and immediately saw the Christmas tree with all our homemade ornaments. Her face lit up with recognition. Grandpa, you still have our angels. Of course I do. They're my favorite decorations. She walked over to examine the paper angels we'd made together last year, each one carefully labeled with the date and her age. Mom said you might not want to see us anymore because we hurt your feelings. The honesty of children could break your heart. Oh, sweetheart, I always want to see you. That will never change. Then why aren't you coming to Christmas dinner? I knelt down so we were at eye level, trying to find words that would explain adult stupidity without making her feel responsible for it. Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that hurt other people's feelings, I said carefully. When that happens, the person who got hurt needs some time to figure out how to handle the situation. Did Mom hurt your feelings? Yes, she did. Did you tell her she hurt your feelings? I tried to. Paisley nodded solemnly, processing this information with the serious attention children give to important matters. Are you going to forgive her? Forgiving someone and pretending nothing happened are two different things, I said. I love your mom very much, but sometimes people need to learn from their mistakes before things can go back to normal. What kind of mistake did she make? How do you explain social snobbery and class discrimination to an 8-year-old? How do you tell a child that her mother was ashamed of her grandfather? She forgot that family means including everyone, not just the people who make you look good. Paisley considered this. Like when Jenna at school said I couldn't sit at her lunch table because my shoes weren't fancy enough? Exactly like that. That made me really sad. I bet it did. And it probably made you not want to be friends with Jenna anymore. Right? Yeah. If someone doesn't want you around because of your shoes, they're not really your friend. That's very wise, sweetheart. We talked for another 10 minutes about school and Christmas and her plans for winter break. Normal grandfather-granddaughter conversation that reminded me what I was actually fighting for, not just my own dignity, but the right to have this relationship without conditions or apologies. When it came time for her to leave, Paisley hugged me extra tight. I hope you change your mind about Christmas, she said. It won't be the same without you. I hope your mom changes her mind about what's really important, I replied. But either way, I love you very much and that will never change. I walked her back to the car, where Whitley was sitting behind the wheel wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She rolled down the window as Paisley climbed into her car seat. Whitley, she wanted to see you. I couldn't say no. You shouldn't have put her in the middle of this. I know. I didn't know what else to do. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to come to me with scraped knees and hurt feelings, before she learned that I was someone to be embarrassed by rather than proud of. You could start by acknowledging what actually went wrong, I said. I said I was sorry. You said you were sorry for hurting my feelings. You never admitted that you were wrong to choose your in-laws' comfort over your own father's dignity. She looked away, unable to meet my eyes even through her sunglasses. It's complicated, Dad. No, it's really not. Either I'm welcome in your family or I'm not. Either you're proud to have me as your father or you're ashamed of me. There's no middle ground here. Of course I'm proud of you. Then prove it. Tell the Ashfords that Christmas dinner includes your father, and if they don't like it, they're welcome to make other arrangements. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could see her wrestling with the choice, probably calculating the cost of standing up to her in-laws versus the cost of losing her father permanently. I can't do that, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Then we don't have anything else to talk about. I stepped back from the car, and she drove away without another word. Through the back window, I could see Paisley waving goodbye, her small hand pressed against the glass like she was trying to reach through it. December 23rd brought the most calls yet, 17 in a single day, escalating in desperation as Christmas Eve approached. I recognized the pattern now. First Whitley would call, her voice getting more emotional with each message. Then Braxton would try, using his business negotiation tone like this was just another deal to be closed. Finally, one of the Ashfords would attempt damage control, usually Penelope with her fake sweet voice explaining how reasonable they were being. But the calls I hadn't expected came from other family members. Whitley's cousin Jasper called from Oregon, saying he'd heard there was some kind of family emergency and offering to help. Her high school friend Maxine called to ask if I was okay, because Whitley had been posting cryptic messages on social media about family being precious and forgiveness being important. It was becoming clear that Whitley was working the extended family network, probably painting herself as the victim of her unreasonable father's sudden decision to abandon the family. The manipulation was impressive in its scope, if not its accuracy. I didn't return any of the calls. Instead, I spent the day packing for my trip to Sacramento and making a final delivery of leftover gifts to my neighbors. The Thompsons got the cashmere sweater for Jim to wear to job interviews. Mrs. Henderson received the expensive cologne to give to her grandson. The restaurant gift certificate went to the young couple next door who'd been eating nothing but ramen noodles since their baby was born. My neighborhood was starting to look like Christmas morning, with everyone comparing notes about the mysterious gifts from the generous grandfather on Elm Street. I didn't mind being known as the guy who gave away thousands of dollars worth of guilt presents. Better that than being known as the guy who could be bought with them. December 24th, Christmas Eve morning, started at 5:43 a.m. with my phone ringing. I'd forgotten to turn off the ringer before bed, and the sound cut through my dreams like a fire alarm. The caller ID showed Whitley's number, but when I answered, I heard Paisley's voice. "Grandpa? Are you awake?" "I am now, sweetheart. What's wrong?" "Mom's crying. She's been crying all night, and she won't tell me why." My heart clenched. Whatever else was happening between Whitley and me, Paisley didn't deserve to spend Christmas Eve watching her mother fall apart. I checked my phone, 99 missed calls. We'd finally reached that number I'd been watching climb all week. "Where is your mom now?" "She's in the kitchen making breakfast, but she keeps dropping things and saying bad words." "Is your dad there?" "He's upstairs talking really loud on the phone with Grandma and Grandpa Ashford. I think they're arguing about something." The Ashford family Christmas was imploding, and an 8-year-old was caught in the middle of it. This was exactly what I'd been trying to avoid. "Paisley, honey, I need you to give the phone to your mom. She said she doesn't want to talk to anyone. Tell her it's important. Tell her Grandpa needs to talk to her about Christmas." I heard muffled conversation, then footsteps, then Whitley's voice, thick with tears and exhaustion. "Dad, what's happening over there?" "Everything's falling apart. The Ashfords are threatening to leave and spend Christmas at their hotel. Braxton's furious with me for not handling the situation better. Paisley keeps asking why everyone's upset, and I don't know what to tell her." "What do you want to tell her?" "The truth. That I made a terrible mistake and hurt the person who's been there for me my whole life, and now I don't know how to fix it." For the first time in over a week, she sounded like my daughter instead of Mrs. Braxton Ashford III. You can start by answering one question honestly, I said. Do you want me at Christmas dinner because you miss me? Or because you need me to solve your problem with the Ashfords? The pause was long enough that I thought the call had been dropped. Both, she said finally. I miss you so much, Dad. But I'm also terrified that I've ruined everything with Braxton's family. And I don't know how to face them. Whitley, here's what I need you to understand. I'm not a solution to your social problems. I'm your father. Either you want me in your life because you love me and you're proud of me. But you can't have it both ways. Accepting me when it's convenient and hiding me when it's not. I know I've been terrible. When the Ashfords talk about their family traditions and their social circle, I feel like such an outsider. Like I have to prove I belong with them. And you thought proving you belonged meant showing them you were ashamed of where you came from. Yes, the word came out like a confession. And I hate myself for it. Do you? Or do you just hate that it didn't work the way you planned? Another long pause. I think I hate that I became someone I don't recognize. Someone who would hurt you to impress people who don't even really like me. That was the most honest thing she'd said in years. The Ashfords don't respect you, Whitley. They tolerate you because you married their son and gave them a grandchild. But they'll never see you as their equal, no matter how much you sacrifice to fit into their world. I'm starting to figure that out. So what are you going to do about it? I don't know. If I choose you over them, Braxton might never forgive me. But if I choose them over you, I'll never forgive myself. Maybe the problem is thinking you have to choose at all. Maybe the problem is being married to someone who would make you choose between your family and his family. I could hear her crying again, softer now. What would Mom have done? The question hit me like a punch to the chest. Delilah had been gone for 3 years, but I still missed her advice more than anything else she'd left behind. Your mother would have told the Ashfords that Christmas dinner was a family celebration, and family included everyone or it included no one. She would have made it clear that anyone who had a problem with her father was welcome to find somewhere else to spend the holiday. She really would have, wouldn't she? Without hesitation. Your mother understood that respect isn't something you earn by throwing other people under the bus. It's something you command by refusing to compromise your values. Dad, is there any chance you could come to Christmas dinner today? Even if the Ashfords are here? Even if it's awkward? Are you inviting me because you want me there? Or because you need me to help manage a difficult situation? Because I want you there. Because Christmas isn't Christmas without you. Because I've spent the last week realizing that impressing people who don't really care about me isn't worth losing the person who's loved me unconditionally my whole life. I looked around my kitchen, at the pies cooling on the counter, at the bag packed for my trip to Sacramento, at the calendar where Christmas Day was now marked with Marlowe's 1 p.m. I already have plans, I said. Oh, the disappointment in her voice was genuine. Of course you do. I waited too long, didn't I? Maybe. But plans can change, if the invitation is genuine and unconditional. What do you mean? I mean, I'll come to Christmas dinner if you promise me 3 things. First, that you're inviting me because you want me there, not because you need me to solve your problems. Second, that you'll never again ask me to make myself smaller so other people can feel bigger. And third, that this is the last time we have this conversation. From now on, I'm either family or I'm not, but I'm not going to be family only when it's convenient. I promise all of that. I swear to you, Dad. Then I'll be there at 2 p.m. But I need you to understand something. I'm not coming to make peace with the Ashfords. I'm coming to have Christmas dinner with my daughter and granddaughter. If your in-laws have a problem with that, they're welcome to leave. What if Braxton gets upset? Then Braxton can decide what's more important, his parents' approval or his wife's happiness. That's not your decision to make for him. You're right. You're absolutely right. One more thing, Whitley. I want you to call Marlo and explain why I won't be coming to Sacramento. I want you to apologize to her personally for the inconvenience and for the fact that your drama forced me to change my plans at the last minute. Of course. I'll call her right now. Good. I'll see you at 2 o'clock. I hung up the phone and sat in my quiet kitchen, second-guessing the decision even as I made it. Was I being too easy on her? Should I have held out longer, made her work harder for forgiveness? But then I thought about Paisley, spending Christmas morning in a house full of tension and adult drama. I thought about Delilah, who would have moved heaven and earth to keep the family together. I thought about the difference between justice and revenge, and decided that sometimes the bigger victory was choosing love over pride. I called Marlo and explained the situation. She was gracious about the change in plans, even offered to pack up some of Pike's prime rib for me to take home later. "Family's complicated," she said, "but it sounds like your daughter finally figured out what really matters." "We'll see. Actions speak louder than words." "They sure do, but sometimes people need a second chance to get their actions right." I spent the morning getting ready for what might be the most interesting Christmas dinner of my life. I showered and put on my good suit, the navy blue one I'd worn to important occasions for the past 15 years. I wrapped Paisley's presents, books I'd chosen carefully, stories about brave girls who stood up for what was right. At 1:45 p.m., I loaded my apple pie and dinner rolls into the Honda and drove across town to Whitley's house. The Ashfords' Mercedes was still in the driveway, along with Braxton's Range Rover and another car I didn't recognize. A full house, perfect for maximum awkwardness. Perfect for showing them all what 99 missed calls of desperation had finally accomplished. I rang the doorbell at exactly 2 p.m. Whitley opened the door immediately, like she'd been waiting by the window. She looked terrible, red eyes, no makeup, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that made her look like the little girl I remembered from 20 years ago. "Dad," she said, and started crying again. "Hey now," I said, stepping inside and hugging her. "No tears on Christmas. We've got a dinner to get through." She held onto me like I might disappear if she let go. "I'm so glad you're here." "Me too, sweetheart." The house smelled like turkey and dysfunction, with underlying notes of expensive perfume and barely contained hostility. I could hear voices from the living room, Braxton talking in the diplomatic tone he used when he was trying to manage a crisis, and deeper voices that must belong to his parents. "How bad is it in there?" I asked. "Pretty bad. The Ashfords are furious that you're coming. Braxton's trying to keep everyone calm. Paisley's hiding in her room because she says the grown-ups are being scary. Well, let's go face the music." Whitley led me into the living room, where I found myself facing the same tableau I'd left a week ago, plus 2 additional players. Braxton stood by the fireplace, still wearing his damage control expression. Garrison and Penelope Ashford sat on the leather sofa like they were holding court, their faces showing varying degrees of displeasure at my arrival. The new addition was a woman about Whitley's age with perfectly styled brown hair and a designer dress that screamed money. She was sitting in the chair closest to Penelope, clearly aligned with the Ashford faction. "Dad," Whitley said, her voice stronger now, "you remember Braxton's parents, and this is Braxton's sister, Vivian." Vivian. Of course her name was Vivian. Probably went to boarding school in Switzerland and summered on the family yacht. "Mr. Carson," Garrison said, not bothering to stand. "I'm surprised you decided to join us after all." "I was invited by my daughter," I said calmly, "and I don't like to disappoint family." Penelope's smile could have frozen water. "How thoughtful of you to reconsider. I hope this means we can all move past this unfortunate misunderstanding." "What misunderstanding is that, Mrs. Ashford?" "This whole situation about Christmas dinner. Surely we can all agree it was just a communication problem." "Actually, I think it was a clarity problem. Now everything's perfectly clear." Vivian leaned forward with the kind of predatory interest rich people showed when they sensed conflict. "I have to say, Mr. Carson, your approach to family disagreements is quite dramatic. All those missed phone calls, refusing to speak to your own daughter." "I wasn't refusing to speak to her. I was waiting for her to say something worth responding to." "And what would that have been?" "The truth. That she was ashamed of me and chose her social standing over her family loyalty." The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Braxton shifted uncomfortably by the fireplace. "I think that's a rather harsh interpretation," Penelope said carefully. "Is it? Let me ask you something, Mrs. Ashford. In the 8 years your son has been married to my daughter, how many times have you invited me to join your family celebrations? Well, that's... Different circumstances call for different approaches. How many times? Depressed. The silence was deafening. How many times have you asked about my health, my interests, or my life in general? More silence. How many times have you treated me like a member of your extended family rather than an inconvenient obligation? Garrison finally spoke up. Mr. Carson, I think you're misunderstanding the nature of family relationships in our social circle. We have certain traditions, certain ways of doing things that might seem exclusive to outsiders. But nothing, I interrupted. You've made it clear from day one that I'm not your kind of people. And that's fine. I'm not looking for your approval. But I'm also not going to pretend that being excluded and looked down on is somehow for my own good. Cordelia's eyes were bright with malicious excitement. So what exactly are you looking for, Mr. Carson? What would satisfy you? Respect. The same respect I've shown your family for 8 years. Even when you made it obvious you thought I was beneath you. And if you don't get this respect? I looked around the room at these people who had spent years treating me like hired help, who had convinced my daughter that her father was a social liability to be managed rather than a person to be loved. Then I guess we'll find out what Christmas is like when half the family is missing. Braxton finally found his voice. Dad, Mr. Carson, I think we all want the same thing here. A peaceful family Christmas. Do we? Because it seems like some people want a Christmas where they don't have to acknowledge that their daughter-in-law comes from working-class people who don't know the difference between salad forks and dinner forks. That's not, Penelope started. Mrs. Ashford, let me save us all some time. I know exactly what you think of me. I know you think I'm low-class, poorly educated, and socially embarrassing. I know you wish Whitley came from a family that looked better on your Christmas cards. And I know that if you could make me disappear without causing problems for your son, you'd do it in a heartbeat. The truth hung in the air like smoke from a fire everyone could smell but no one wanted to acknowledge. What I don't know, I continued, is why you think I should be grateful for the privilege of being tolerated by people who clearly don't want me around. Garrison stood up, his face flushed with anger. Now see here, Carson. You can't come into our family celebration and start making accusations. Your family celebration? I stood up too, matching his energy. This is my daughter's house, in my daughter's living room, eating dinner with my granddaughter. If anyone's crashing someone else's family celebration, it's you. That's enough. Braxton stepped between us, his diplomatic facade finally cracking. This is supposed to be Christmas dinner, not a family therapy session. You're absolutely right, I said, not taking my eyes off Garrison. So let's all be honest about what kind of family we're celebrating with. Whitley had been silent through this entire exchange, but now she spoke up, her voice shaky but determined. Actually, Dad's right, about all of it. Everyone turned to look at her. She was standing in the doorway to the kitchen, holding a dish towel like a security blanket. Whitley, Penelope said in a warning tone, you're upset. Maybe you should. I should have said this years ago, Whitley interrupted. You've never treated my father with respect. You've made it clear that you think I married beneath your son's station. And I've spent 8 years trying to prove I was worthy of your approval by distancing myself from the man who raised me and loved me unconditionally. Vivian laughed, actually laughed. Oh, please, this is so middle-class dramatic. Whitley, your father is perfectly fine. No one's trying to hurt him. No one's trying to include him either. Whitley shot back. When was the last time you asked him about his work, his hobbies, his life? When was the last time any of you treated him like a person instead of an inconvenient relative to be managed? That's not fair, Braxton said. My family has always been polite to your father. Polite. Whitley's voice was getting stronger. Like he's the hired help. Like he's someone you have to be nice to but don't actually have to care about. Whitley, Penelope started. No, Mama Ashford. I'm done pretending this is okay. I'm done pretending that being polite is the same thing as being welcoming. I'm done choosing your comfort over my father's dignity. The room fell silent except for the sound of the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. For generations of family dysfunction, finally coming to a head over Christmas dinner. Garrison straightened his tie, a gesture I was beginning to recognize as his way of regaining control. Well, I can see that emotions are running high. Perhaps it would be best if Penelope and I returned to our hotel. Perhaps it would, Whitley said, her voice steady now. If you can't treat my father with basic respect, then you're not welcome at my Christmas dinner. Braxton's face went white. Whitley, you can't mean that. I absolutely mean it. I've spent years trying to be the daughter-in-law your parents wanted, and I lost myself in the process. I almost lost my father too. That stops today. Penelope gathered her purse with the kind of precise movements people use when they're furious but trying to maintain dignity. I see. Well, Braxton, I suppose you'll have to choose between your wife's family drama and your own family's Christmas tradition. Braxton looked back and forth between his wife and his parents like a man caught between two fires. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I choose my wife, he said finally, and my daughter. And that means I choose Mr. Carson too, because he's part of our family. Garrison's face went through several shades of red before settling on purple. This is unacceptable. We came here to celebrate Christmas with our son and granddaughter, not to be lectured by the grandfather of your granddaughter? I interrupted. By the man who walked your daughter-in-law down the aisle when she married your son? By someone who's been part of this family longer than you have. You are not part of our family, Penelope said, her mask of politeness finally slipping completely. You may be related to Whitley, but you are not an Ashford. You're absolutely right, I said. I'm not an Ashford. I'm a Carson, and I raised a daughter who's strong enough to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. I looked at Whitley, who was standing straighter now, looking more like the girl I'd raised than the society wife she'd been trying to become. I'm proud of you, I told her. Tears started running down her face again, but she was smiling now. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. Vivian made a disgusted sound. This is all very touching, but some of us came here for Christmas dinner, not a Hallmark movie. Then you know where the door is, Whitley said without hesitation. The Ashfords gathered their coats and dignity and left without saying goodbye to anyone, including their granddaughter. Through the front window, I watched them load into their Mercedes and drive away, probably heading back to their hotel to spend Christmas ordering room service and complaining about their son's poor judgment in marrying a woman with inappropriate family connections. Well, Braxton said after the front door closed behind them, that went about as well as expected. Are you okay? Whitley asked him. I know that was hard. It was necessary, he said, surprising me. I should have stood up to them years ago. I let them treat your father badly because it was easier than dealing with their disapproval. That was wrong. He turned to me, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. Mr. Carson, I owe you an apology. A real one, not the damage control kind I tried before. I let my parents make you feel unwelcome in your own daughter's house. I prioritized their comfort over your dignity. And I put Whitley in an impossible position by not setting boundaries with them. I studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity or manipulation. All I saw was a man who'd finally grown a backbone. Apology accepted, I said. But this can't happen again. Family means family, all of it, not just the parts that look good in Christmas cards. Understood. And from now on, holidays are about our family. Whitley, Paisley, you, and anyone else who actually wants to be here. Speaking of Paisley, Whitley said, I should go get her. She's been hiding upstairs through all of this. Poor kid, I said. She shouldn't have had to listen to adults fighting on Christmas. No, she shouldn't. But maybe it's good that she saw her mother finally standing up for what's right. Whitley went upstairs to collect our missing family member, leaving Braxton and me alone in the living room for the first time in years. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. For what it's worth, Braxton said finally, I think my parents are wrong about you. You've been nothing but generous to our family. and we've repaid that generosity by treating you like a second-class relative. Your parents aren't wrong about me being different from them, I said. I am different. I work with my hands, I didn't go to fancy schools, and I don't know how to navigate social situations where everyone's trying to impress each other. But being different isn't the same thing as being less than. I know that now. I should have known it all along. The important thing is that you know it going forward. We heard footsteps on the stairs, and then Paisley came flying into the living room like a small tornado, launching herself into my arms with the kind of enthusiasm only 8-year-olds could manage. Grandpa, Mom said you're staying for Christmas dinner. I sure am, sweetheart. Are you ready to eat some turkey? Yes, and I want to sit next to you. And I want to tell you about my Christmas play at school. And I want to show you the present I made for you. I want to hear about all of that. Whitley appeared in the doorway, looking relieved and exhausted and somehow younger than she had in years. Should we eat? She asked. I think we've had enough drama for one day. Actually, I said, I think we've had just the right amount of drama. Sometimes families need to clear the air before they can BR. She quickly removed the extra place settings, leaving just 4 chairs around the table, our real family, the people who actually wanted to be there. The turkey was perfect, the stuffing was exactly like Delilah used to make, and the conversation was the kind of easy, natural flow that happens when people don't have to watch every word for fear of offending someone who's looking for reasons to be offended. Paisley told us about her Christmas play, where she'd played an angel and forgotten half her lines but improvised something about love being the most important gift. Braxton talked about his plans to start his own consulting firm instead of relying on his family's business connections. Whitley shared her idea of going back to school to finish the nursing degree she'd abandoned when she got married. For the first time in years, we talked like a real family instead of people trying to impress each other or avoid saying the wrong thing. After dinner, we moved to the living room where Paisley distributed presents with the methodical efficiency of a seasoned gift distribution professional. She saved mine for last, presenting me with a wrapped box that clearly contained something she'd made herself. Inside was a photo album titled My Grandpa and Me, filled with pictures of us together over the years. Baking cookies, building snowmen, reading stories, all the moments that had mattered to her even when they apparently hadn't mattered to the adults around us. The last page had a picture of us from last Christmas, both of us grinning at the camera while wearing matching reindeer antlers. Below it, in her careful 8-year-old handwriting, she'd written, My grandpa is the best because he loves me exactly how I am. I love you exactly how you are too, I told her, my voice a little rougher than usual. I know, she said, climbing into my lap like she had when she was smaller. That's what makes you the best grandpa ever. I looked around the room at my family, my real family, the people who had chosen love over appearances, connection over convenience. Whitley was curled up next to Braxton on the couch, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in years. Braxton was actually smiling, not the diplomatic smile he wore for social occasions, but a genuine expression of contentment. My phone, silent since this morning, buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and saw Marlowe's name. How did Christmas dinner go? Did you get your family back? I typed back, better than that. I got my self-respect back too. Even better. Love you, brother. Love you too. As the evening wound down and it came time for me to head home, Whitley walked me to the door. Dad, I know I have a lot to make up for. Years of putting other people's opinions ahead of your feelings. I don't know how to fix all of that. You don't fix it all at once, I said. You fix it by making better choices going forward. By remembering that family loyalty goes both ways. By never again asking me to make myself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. I promise. And Dad, next year Christmas dinner is at your house. If people don't like your cooking or your decorations or anything else about how you do things, they can find somewhere else to celebrate. Are you sure about that? I'm sure. It's time I learned how to be proud of where I come from instead of ashamed of it. I hugged her goodbye, noting how she held on just a little longer than usual, like she was making up for all the times she'd been too busy or too embarrassed to really connect with her old man. Driving home through the quiet Christmas evening, I thought about the 99 missed calls that had started this whole adventure. 99 attempts to reach me, but it had taken my daughter almost losing me completely before she'd finally said something worth answering. My phone buzzed with a new message, but this time I didn't mind checking it. It was from Whitley. "Thank you for not giving up on us. Merry Christmas, Dad. I love you." I pulled into my driveway and sat in my car for a moment, looking at my modest house with its simple decorations and realizing that sometimes the best Christmas present was learning that you were worth more than you'd been settling for. Inside, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat down at my kitchen table to finally listen to those 99 voicemails. Most were variations on the same theme: apologies, explanations, increasingly desperate pleas for forgiveness. But listening to them now, I could hear something else. The sound of a daughter slowly realizing that some things were more important than social approval. The last message was different from the others. It was from this morning before I'd agreed to come to dinner. "Dad, it's me. I know you probably won't listen to this, but I need to say it anyway. I was wrong. Not just about Christmas dinner, but about everything. I let other people convince me that you weren't good enough, when the truth is I wasn't good enough for you. You deserved a daughter who was proud of you, who stood up for you, who never made you feel like you had to earn your place in your own family. I failed you, and I'm sorry. I love you, and I miss you, and if you never forgive me, I'll understand. But I needed you to know that I finally figured out what Mom would have done. She would have chosen you, every time without hesitation. I should have done the same thing. I saved that message and deleted the other 98. Some things were worth keeping, and some things were worth letting go. Tomorrow I'd wake up in a house that felt like home again, in a life where I was valued instead of tolerated. I call Paisley and make plans for next weekend. I'd probably hear from Whitley, not because she needed something, but because she wanted to talk to her dad. But tonight, I was content to sit in my kitchen with my coffee and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes standing up for yourself was the greatest gift you could give your family. Those 99 missed calls had taught them all a lesson they'd never forget, that respect wasn't something you could take for granted, and that even the quietest person had limits. They'd learned what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. They'd discovered that the old man they'd been taking for granted had more patience than they'd expected, but also more backbone than they'd ever imagined. And most importantly, they'd realized that love without respect was just manipulation with better intentions. The clock on my wall chimed midnight, officially ending Christmas Day. In the quiet that followed, I could hear my neighbor's dog barking, the distant sound of someone's late-night Christmas movie, the normal sounds of a normal neighborhood where normal families lived normal lives. I was finally part of a normal family again. But more than that, I was part of a family that had learned the hard way what happened when they forgot that every person, no matter how quiet or generous, deserved to be treated with dignity. And that was the best Christmas present I could have asked for. If you enjoyed watching this entitled family learn the hard way that respect can't be bought with expensive gifts, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in my situation. Would you have answered those 99 calls? Or would you have made them sweat even longer? Don't forget to subscribe to His Sweet Revenge and hit the bell icon so you never miss stories of justice being served to people who think they're better than everyone else. Trust me, we've got plenty more tales of arrogant families getting exactly what they deserve. And if you have your own revenge story where family members learned not to take you for granted, drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and who knows, your story might be featured in our next video. Until next time, remember, sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't what you do, it's what you don't do. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story of sweet, sweet justice.